Hello, welcome to the Sallen coefficient of the Ruhr and the Ohio. I'm going to talk about both of these. I will mention how they are different, whether or not I would consider them like an expansion or a whole separate game, or what exactly it would be. And I will tell you what the overall Sallen coefficient is of the Ruhr and its Ohio counterpart, as well as give you my own personal thoughts. So just so you have a little background, the Ruhr is based on a originally European release called Ruhrschifffahrt, designed by Thomas Spitzer and released by Spielworks. And it's a game that's about delivering coal originally down the Ruhr River in Germany. And then to reprint it, Clay from Capstone Games, who's already handled the American reprint of Haspel Connect, which is the first in this series of three, this trilogy. But to do the reprint, Cole totally asked Thomas to go in and redesign an entire new version of the game called the Ohio that tells the story of shipping goods along the Ohio River in the early 1800s. So let's get into what I feel about the game. The first thing I'd like to mention is that the specific gameplay here, kind of being like a pickup and delivery sort of game, seems to push pickup and delivery in some really interesting directions because of the special roles that you're going to be selecting as you choose your dice. Also, the river, the central core mechanic of you being able to travel as far down the river as you want to, but getting back up the river costs you money, costs you resources, and money is very tight in this game. It to me is like it gives this takes a snapshot, like a much more so than just reading a blurb in a history book could be, about what it was like to deliver goods down the Ohio River or down the Ruhr River. And all the different little elements here are just going to be very much tied to the theme at its core. And I do find that the central mechanic of being pickup and delivery, but you've got a river to worry about and you've got these special actions to select, it gives me difficult decisions. And I've noticed that new players, as well as experienced players, every single turn, there's never just like an automatic thing. You're always like, where should I go right now? And that's because everything is really tied into a very cohesive package here. Not only are you using the river to deliver goods to get you this economic bonus, but also where you're delivering these goods are going to determine what you actually can do with that money, because you really score points here from the development tiles that allow you to build warehouses. And you have to have money to be able to build warehouses, but you also have to have made the correct deliveries to be able to achieve those development tiles in the first place. Some of them, even those development tokens, are going to be fought over. So I mean, like, it is really an interesting and crunchy, difficult, heavy Euro system that I really enjoy. And I would say that as far as all of that together sounds really great, and you add to that the entire game's turn order is the river. Like, the order that you do things in, everything that you can do is like manipulated by where you're at on that river. So you want to be last to do something, then you go at the end. You make sure that you are earlier on. And I just would say that all of these different game systems tie up into an incredibly cohesive core package. I do like the tech track is, in my opinion, Thomas Spitzer's tech tracks are just some of the most interesting I've ever seen in any game. In Haspel Connect, he had a fairly standard tech track, but the fact that you could only sort of grow downwards and those were randomized made it interesting. It was a lightly interesting system, but it was something that gave it this variability that made me want to keep coming back. Here you don't have so much of the variability, but this just it ties to the core mechanic in a way that would be impossible if you had just some sort of shuffling of different regions and stuff like that. So just the fact that when I'm delivering to these different locations, and deliveries to Port Cairo are just much more complex and difficult to work out. When I'm delivering to each of those locations, though, I've got all these different separate tough decisions that are all part of one core gameplay. And that's what I love to see in Euro games. So the specific some elements of the game that I think are a little bit weak. I would say the transport track to me is just kind of the way that the dice come in on it, and then the way that they leave are not. It's not terribly an interesting part of the game, I would say. I guess just the where you put the goods when you're done delivering them, or the coal if you're playing on the Ruhr side, is not exactly my favorite thing in the game. I think that they could have done it in a little bit more of a just, added maybe something interesting, or just made it so that it was less confusing, because I feel like it adds a little bit of confusing elements to it without really rewarding how you're actually going to be playing. It's not going to be giving you much more difficult decisions. The other part of this game, let's see, is there anything else that I really don't? I mean, really, there's not anything that I so much dislike. I would just have to say, though, that I'm going to give the Sallen coefficient of this game is going to seem really low, especially since I do really enjoy the game. And that's because there is 12 rounds in this game, and the game takes a very long time to play. It really does. It kind of, I don't know if it's just been the people that I play with, but it tends to really lock up new players. You've got some really tough decisions to be making, and every decision that you're making in the early game is determining what you're going to be able to do for the whole rest of the game, which I personally love, but it does make the game take a little bit too long. And now, for me personally, I don't really have much of an issue with it. I keep coming back to it. I really do love this, and I'm a very impatient gamer. But it's been mentioned several times, by several I mean in like 2 of the 5 games I've played of this, that this is a really cool system. I want it to be an hour shorter, or I want it to be a half hour shorter. Like, everybody who I've played it with seems to want the game to be slightly shorter than it is. And that's just, I mean, you've got so many different decisions that you're making, and they really are like, the tech tree is really cool, really innovative, but it's so unique, so different that when you're making deliveries, you're like, oh, wait a minute, you kind of have to cross-reference every single tile, and you have to kind of make your strategy referencing all the tiles in the game. So it can definitely lock up players a little bit that way. Not an issue for me, but it does result in the Sallen coefficient, which is what I'm trying to give here. When I give the Sallen coefficient, it's kind of a rating that gives you an idea of your decisions per minute. And while I do think the depth of the decisions helps out the Sallen coefficient here, it's only going to be a 6 for this game, and that's specifically because the game does go on quite long. I think 12 rounds is a lot. I don't know how you could shorten it, because it's specifically 12 rounds so that you can get up to these higher development tiles, and it does make sense to me. But it just kind of has a way of feeling like you're kind of doing largely the same thing, like delivering the coal. Like, the core mechanic is really used, having to do that 12 times is kind of a lot, and it does kind of, towards the end of the game, start to feel a little bit like the river's starting to congeal a little bit. It's getting a little bit cold, a little bit like wintertime. So overall, my own feelings about the Ruhr, though, is that it's got this really, really cool tech track that is just absolutely nothing like it at all, that's so tied to the core mechanics of the gameplay. I've never seen a tech track that's like that. Usually, tech track's an auxiliary thing that you're like, well, I'll choose this and it'll make this better. No. You're not just choosing things on the tech track here. You are having to make your deliveries and make things happen to get there on the tech track. It's the core mechanism of the game. Awesome. I'm going to give the Sallen coefficient, not just a Sallen coefficient. You already heard that. That's a 6. My personal opinion on the game is it's an 8, but I feel like it's a kind of low 8, and that's because I am really just infatuated with this system and the way that this tech tree works. But that might not be the case for you. Let me now talk about the Ruhr side of it, or not the Ruhr, but the Ohio side of the game. And let me just say straight up that had I not played the Ohio before doing this video, had I just done it on the Ruhr, my personal rating of this game would have never been higher than a 7. So the Ruhr was improved greatly in my eyes by adding the Ohio to the game. Not only do you have some just varied map setup where you've got in the Ruhr, your more valuable dice, you kind of have to unlock those, but they're far enough away so that they're not that big of a deal. And you could theoretically not even get to that region for a while, though it does tend to be very beneficial to the players that get there first. It's just nice to not have that competition, and you get more points for developing locks there. Here on the Ohio side, you've instead got the map sort of flipped around, and you have this special city, Louisville, that even has its own spot on the tech track. And Louisville, to deliver there, is just so huge, because then you can finally start unlocking the other side of the map, and that's the only time when you're actually going to be able to make any deliveries to the external port. So if you want to make any points that way, you're going to have to get to Louisville. It really does kind of create this bit of a choke point at Louisville that is very interesting. I love that each of the cities gives a specific bonus, and sometimes those involve choice, which is just a nice new way to make each city more differentiated from other ones that wasn't so present in the Ruhr. I love the new coal mechanism. I love the way that it's kind of crappier than gold, because gold is amazing, but I love the way that these coal cubes, at the start of the game, you can choose either to get 3 of them or to get 1 gold, and that coal can be used very efficiently, because it's basically its only use, to help haul you back up the river. And especially in the later game, when things start costing so much money to do anything, to do any special actions, you're going to want to use coal as much as possible. So I really did enjoy that, and I think that's a great part of the game. Those are the 2 really main additions. I feel like, though, it's difficult to really quantify this, but the Ohio side of the map just shows that there has been development. It feels like the designer sort of saw that he played the game more, and just with more play testing, they didn't so much fix the game. The game is not changed, but they did change. Well, I guess there were a few small fixes, but they changed the notation on the Ohio side of the map, so that way it's just much more clear. You know how much money you're spending to take actions that were otherwise hidden on the other side of the map. So just all in all, the Ohio is what I would go to play. Even if you're a new player, I think the Ohio is going to have it's going to be an easier learning experience, even though it's a more robust game, just because the notation has had some time to really get ironed out, and you're going to get the best possible game. And I would say that's amazing that Capstone Games did that with this game. It makes this game much more relevant to an individual like myself. Without the Ohio, this would be a dreaded 7. With the Ohio, no, this is a game that I enjoy, that I want to keep playing. It has those really difficult long-term affecting decisions. Almost no randomness in the game. The events barely affect, like they just make some regions cost a little bit tastier to go to, but you've got to kind of decide, like, am I going to go for that, or am I going to go for like my core strategy? So it just makes the events really just makes for some more difficult decisions, though the one that makes it so you can't pilot can be really crippling if it happens in rapid succession, and when you're hoping to be able to do a crucial activity like delivering to Louisville. So that's kind of overall my thoughts on the Ruhr and the Ohio. I hope this has given you an idea of whether or not they're ones that you should go and check out and bring to your table. Hopefully the Sallen coefficient helps you know, if you're an impatient gamer like myself, whether or not you're going to have to invest a little bit more time. I do think that it's worth your extra added time investment, though not every player is going to feel that way, especially like I said, some players that I played with felt that the game went on a little bit too long for what it was. So not my personal thoughts, but I hope that helps in you making your decision of whether or not to check out the Ruhr, the Ohio. I'd like to quickly thank Clay for giving me the Ruhr, the Ohio as a review copy for me to send around to my game group and have everybody try it out now that this sound coefficient is done. I also need to thank and would like to thank my sponsor, Game Surplus. Goodness gracious. Thanks to Game Surplus for sponsoring the good, the bored, and the ugly, as well as the Sallen coefficient. And you can check them out at gamesurplus.com. They're an amazing online retailer for my podcast, The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. They do have an entire podcast pick sections. If you go there and you like the way any of those games and you like the prices that you're seeing, well, you can get it for 10% cheaper if you check out with the coupon code Good, Bored, Ugly Picks. So anyway, go check out Game Surplus. The owner, Carmen, is a gamer like you and me, and he's really trying to build a community of individuals in his online game store. So he's adding the best of both worlds from your friendly local game store, and you can get everything online. Check them out, gamesurplus.com, and subscribe to this on YouTube, so that way on the next Sallen coefficient video you can get you can know that it's coming and everything. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm Joe Sallen. That's the Sallen coefficient. Check out the next video on the Sallen coefficient.